In the interest of time, please click chat, enter your name if you'd like, your company, if you're a transition, what you're looking for, and feel free to add your LinkedIn profile as well, because it's really important for you to be able to kind of connect with other folks on the call and outside as well. And we're also on live stream, so we're on hopefully LinkedIn. I've been having some issues with Restream, but we're definitely on Facebook and YouTube as well. And for those who are on this call, if you can turn your video on, that would be great, because we're really trying to create community and conversation on these calls. And we have an amazing guest who I'll introduce soon. You know, for the next part of this video, I want you to, on the top right-hand side, put yourself on gallery mode. So we look like the Brady Bunch. And we always start our calls with a series of questions. Ready? So you're gonna raise your hand. So 1 is kind of doesn't describe me at all. 2, kind of. 3, somewhat well. 10 being, this is completely describes me. So 1, not as much. 10 completely describes me. And I'm gonna ask you a series of questions. Rate yourself from 1 to 10. Got it? Nod your head? Okay. So do you seek to learn? Oh, and also for the folks on live stream, I want you to type in your answer, whether it's a 10 or 1 or whatever, in the comments, because we can't actually see you, okay? So do you seek to learn new things for the sheer joy of learning and growing? Rate yourself 1 to 10. Okay. Interesting, yes. Right? Do you sometimes go sleepless at night trying to solve a problem, work tirelessly to figure it out? Then, oh, sorry, let me mute some folks right now. Sorry, guys. Okay. 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 So do you sometimes go sleepless at night trying to solve a problem, work tirelessly to figure it out, then feel frustrated if you can't? Rate yourself 1 to 10. Are you the type that is totally cool with uncertainty to the extent that you never really try to avoid fuzzy scenarios, even if you aren't sure of your abilities? Rate yourself 1 to 10. Would you say you're a risk taker who loves doing scary things, taking on new adventures, and hanging out with unpredictable people? Score yourself 1 to 10. Okay. So thank you so much. And now for the next part, top right-hand side, put yourself on speaker mode, so you should just see me. So for those who were either on live stream or in the Zoom live audience who scored themselves, the higher your score, the more curious you are. So this is a generalization, but based upon research by T.B. Cashton, greater curiosity among subjects usually predicts greater job satisfaction, engagement, work relationships, and innovation, greater success in attaining goals, and in positive feelings from achieving, healthier, more positive social relationships, more humorous, playful, and adaptable dispositions, and better adaptation to stressful situations, more openness to inventive thinking and less defensiveness, and greater sensitivity to the feelings and concerns of others. So the research suggests that greater curiosity brings along with it greater professional, social, and psychological success. So excited for this micro-learning today on curiosity with Diane Hamilton. You might, for some that are new to our micro-learning, what a micro-learning is it's a training and development that focuses on offering bite-sized small learning units with just the right amount of information to help learners achieve a goal. So this is not a webinar where you passively talk with talking heads. We actually want you a part of the conversation. And we want you to actually take 1, 2, 3 actions after we hang up. Diane's gonna give some really insightful information that will hopefully kind of help you with your curiosity, right? And how do you kind of nurture and develop it? And as we are community focused, we really want you to connect with other folks who are either on this call or on LinkedIn to really hold each other accountable. So feel free to ping each other on LinkedIn, connect with each other. As you know, we're about Community 7, we're creating like a huge community of people really out there to kind of support each other. So, as mentioned, today's topic is on cracking the curiosity code with Dr. Diane Hamilton. Before we begin, in the chat, and for those who are kind of watching on live stream as well, I want you to answer the following question. What's the one main reason why people lose their curiosity as they age? So don't press send yet, just type it in the comments right now. What's the number one reason why people lose their curiosity as they get older? Okay, and then I'm gonna count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, send. Fear, boredom, they become set in their ways, they lack time, lack of interest and disappointment, they set their own beliefs and opinions. Okay, awesome. So curiosity, curiosity is one of the most analyzed, discussed, and written topics in human behavior study. We learned that innate from birth, that children have this childlike curiosity from a young age. We've also learned that it's essential for the survival of the entire animal kingdom to be curious. And the most successful leaders and entrepreneurs attribute their success to sustaining their childlike curiosity. In contrast, many people's sense of curiosity tends to wane or deteriorate as they age. For the longest time, we attributed this diminished state of curiosity to the aging process itself, but studies have shown that this is not the case. So really excited to kind of hear Dr. Hamilton kind of talk about curiosity. And one of the things that she covers in her book, which you should pick up if you haven't done so yet, Cracking the Curiosity Code. I've bookmarked a lot of it. It's wonderful. But she talks about the acronym FATE, which is fears, assumptions, technology, environment, which are the major factors contributing to diminished curiosity. And so she's going to talk today about kind of her research into curiosity. So quick introduction, Dr. Diane Hamilton is a behavioral expert, author, speaker, and consultant. She's a sought after expert in emotional intelligence and behavioral science with nearly 4 decades of real world experience. She is the creator of the Curiosity Code Index and the author of 4 books sold worldwide. She's a thought leader in leadership in sales, marketing, management, engagement, personality, curiosity, and motivation. And she's a nationally syndicated radio host, award-winning speaker, author, and educator. And that's actually how I met Diane when I was on her show. So super excited to have Diane today. Diane, if you can kind of unmute yourself. And you are one of the world's leading expert on curiosity. Can you kind of tell us what inspired you to study curiosity and what got you inspired to write the book, Cracking the Curiosity Code? I spent the whole weekend reading it and I was really fascinated with all the insights. What got you into this?
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me here and all the people who showed up. I love how curious that you are, that you did that. When you write about emotional intelligence and curiosity and some of those things, the things that we need to work on, sometimes we don't put our hand up and say, I need to get help with this because we don't have those things to recognize we need some help. So I love that everybody's fascinated by these topics. And well, what led my interest was kind of people like you. People who are on my show, I would interview everybody from billionaires, the Ken Fishers of the world, or there's a Craig from Craigslist, and people like that you're talking to every day, or Steve Forbes is on my show, or somebody like that, and they're super curious people. And I thought, this would be really an interesting book to write about curiosity. And as I started to write it, I looked up research to find out how to fix this. You have to measure it. In my mind, I'm very quantitative. So, I had written my dissertation on emotional intelligence and knew all the personality assessments and training from that. So I looked for the assessments. And you mentioned Kashdan earlier. He's very famous for his work in curiosity. He created an assessment that it'll tell you if you have high or low levels. And so if you have low levels, then what do? It doesn't really tell me what I wanted to know. And what I wanted to know is, well, what's stopping you? Because if you don't know what's stopping you, how do you move forward, right? So as I was writing this book, thinking, oh, I want to share how to be curious with all my students, because I've taught thousands of online business courses. I was the MBA program chair at the Ford School of Business, and I've been a doctoral chair, and I've worked as a dean. I've been in all levels of education. And I found that a lot of students just wanted you to give them the fish instead of teach them to fish. And I wanted them to want to learn to fish. So the book was a companion piece to what I did next, was create the Curiosity Code Index, which is like, if you have taken emotional intelligence test or DISC or something like that, where you get a report. It's kind of like that. But instead of putting people in boxes and telling you, oh, you're a D or an I, you're an S, you're a C kind of thing, it was more like emotional intelligence that I found. This is your level. Here's what's stopping you. And now we can move forward because we know what are these factors. So I spent years working on this with different companies. And as you were talking about some of the things and that came out as important for curiosity, it really ties into engagement. It ties into innovation. It ties into everything everybody was hiring me to speak about in terms of soft skills in general. And I noticed that somebody, when they were writing I'm going to have to see who said it, who was saying, I think it was Deanne, wrote that getting out of status quo thinking was what stopped you, is your status quo. And really, that's how I look at curiosity for what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get people to get out of that status quo, always doing same thing. We're going to end up a Blockbuster or Kodak company because of it. And all of the research out there with the companies I worked with tied into the value and how it improved engagement. I've worked with Novartis, for example, big pharmaceutical company. They would take engagement surveys and then train in curiosity and then do more engagement surveys, and they could see it made an improvement. It dramatically improved. And if you're losing, according to Gallup, we're losing 550 billion a year on engagement. We want to improve engagement, obviously. So curiosity is, I liken it to baking a cake. So stay with me. I know, okay, it's okay. So let's say you're going to bake a cake. You've got all your ingredients. You've got water and eggs and oil and flour, whatever it is that you're using, cake mix in my case, because it's easier. You're mixing your ingredients put it in your pan. You're putting it in the oven, and then you're wanting cake, right? Well, if you didn't turn on the oven, you don't get cake, you get goo. All that work, you don't get what you're trying to do. In the working world, we have all these ingredients that we know are important: innovation, engagement, motivation, all the soft skills, all the ingredients, we're mixing them together, but nobody's turning on the oven. And that oven, that spark, is curiosity. And it doesn't matter who's on my show. It could be Francesca Gino from Harvard, who's done a great HBR piece on the case for curiosity, or a motivation expert or creativity expert, you name it, they all agree. The thing that comes first is curiosity.
So, we mentioned that companies, especially you mentioned the Gallup poll, where, companies lose 500 billion per year. Mm-hmm. Due to employee disinterest and lack of curiosity. Okay, so CEOs understand this. What's inhibiting curiosity? Like you kind of mentioned your, FATE. Uh-huh. What are the factors that are preventing people from being curious?
Well, if you look at the data and you watch some of the TED Talks like Sir Ken Robinson or George Land, there's some great talks out there that talk about creativity that are very similar to what happens to curiosity. Around age 5, we peak, we get this great level and we're like, oh yay, and then it goes and it tanks out. And that was what was very fascinating to me, because I have a picture that I share in my talks of these 2 little girls at the art museum in San Francisco Museum of Art, 1968 at Life magazine. Kind of, it's a great picture. And, there's all this beautiful artwork on the walls. And what are they doing? They're on the ground looking through an air vent. Okay. They want to know what's behind that. And you want to do that until your parents are like, get off the ground, you're getting dirty, or whatever it is. And so we all find that these factors in life inhibit our curiosity. And what I did was very similar to what you just did, is I asked people, what do you think keeps you from being curious? And I started out with LinkedIn. I just asked people because I was curious as I was writing the book before I decided to do my assessment. And overwhelmingly,
can you pause 1 second? Because I actually want to ask that question to the folks who are on live stream and in our live audience. So in the comments right now, can you type in what was the question you asked again?
Well, I asked, what do you think keeps you from being curious?
So what keeps you from being curious at this moment, you personally? So type that in, count down 3, 2, 1. What's keeping you from being curious? Lack of time. Okay, so fear of failure. So kind of similar to the last kind of.
Yeah, this basically the same question, yes. But it's so important to keep getting those answers, because what was interesting to me was I wasn't surprised at all by fear. Nobody wants to look stupid, so you don't want to ask a question. There's some great research at Oxford show men ask 2.5 times more questions after watching an event. They're more likely to ask questions right away, where women might wait for 6 or more questions. And there's a difference in men and women a little bit. Men are more apt to be more outgoing in that setting, but they had very similar results when I started to research it in more depth. And so what I did is I hired Harvard experts and, all these psychometric statisticians, and nobody could resolve what I was trying to do. They kept coming up with Todd Kashdan's kind of thing where it told you if you're high or low. And I'm like, no, I want to know what's stopping you. So after learning the factor analysis and teaching myself a lot of this stuff, I ended up writing my own, and I published this in a peer-reviewed journal. So this is all very good, valid research. But we found that there were 4 things. And as you had mentioned, they're fear, assumptions, technology, and environment. I want to go through those because fear was not surprising to me. I mean, I studied thousands of people for years, and fear, of course, is a huge, huge issue for people, because how many times you've been in a meeting and you're like, I want to ask, but I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to have Lan ask, hey, man, why don't you? Better she looks stupid than I do, right? So we all have that, where I'm thinking I'm the only one. I'm going to feel unprepared. There's a whole lot that falls under the area of fear. So each of these have subcomponents to it of what you're afraid of. Fear of failure, I've seen in the chat box. There's fear of so many things, right? And the second one kind of ties into that. It's assumptions, and assumptions are what we tell ourselves, right? It's that voice in your head that it's kind of like, okay, and when I talk to groups, I'll say, how much, it's like this, how much does this weigh? And everybody will yell out, 16, 20 ounces, whatever they think it is. And I'll say, it doesn't matter. What matters is how long I hold on to it, right? If right away, it doesn't bother me. After an hour, my arm's tired. Whole day, my arm's paralyzed. Well, that's kind of like our assumptions, right? It's fleeting, no big deal. But after a while, you start telling yourself, I'm not going to like that. I took that. It was really stupid. Or if I do that, if I ask that, they'll just give me the whole project and not pay me for it, or whatever it is that we tell ourselves, right? We have this inner monologue that goes on that'll talk us out of things. And a lot of that can lead to fear. So some of these things they overlap to some extent. What I thought was interesting was technology, because technology is it really over or underutilization of it. And you might be the biggest genius in the world when it comes to math, but if I just throw you a calculator and never teach you the math behind it, we'll never know that, right? But we want you to know how to use the calculator, but not overutilize it. But you want to have foundations. So you need to have high tech and low tech days, basically, so that you learn the foundational things, but then you also learn how to utilize it to its best advantage. And a lot of people become overwhelmed and they think, oh, I just learned that version. Now they've got another one. And, there's all that, and that could lead to that voice in your head again, and that could lead to fear. And so there's a lot of that. And some of that ties into the next one, which is environment. Some of us weren't raised around technology, and you had to kind of catch up, and that can be overwhelming for people. But your environment, mostly the E in fate is everybody you've ever known. It's your current boss, your past boss, your family, your teachers, your friends, anybody with whom you've had interaction with. So you might be afraid to do something because I had a boss. I asked a question once and he looked at me and he goes, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm never asking you a question again, because you either just thought I was the biggest idiot in the world for asking it, or you think I'm, not qualified or whatever it is, So we have that in our mind, our experiences, our environment is huge. You look at that age, that 6-year-old kid that's really super curious, but what happens? They get into school and the teachers have to teach to the test. They have so many students in the class, they can't answer every question. There's a lot of it. It's Ken Robinson said, we're teaching ourselves out of our competencies because we value certain things as maybe everybody should have a science degree, or everybody should have a math degree, or everybody should. And then where does the creativity part fall in, and where does the curiosity fall in, and where does so there's a lot of it that we're not trying to do this, but we inadvertently are eliminating some of the things that would help build us up. And that's really problematic.
I think about this, what you said about 5 years old kind of kids being kind of peaking. My daughter's 6 now. Uh-huh. And so this is really relevant for me because for the folks who are on this call or watching right now, I'm sure many of you have kids, some might be older, but think about when they were 5 or 6. They ask a lot of questions, right? Uh-huh. And reading your book made me really kind of think, because I remember growing up and asking a lot of questions, and the one thing my parents would say is, stop asking so many questions. Why are you asking so many questions? The other one is, don't be so nosy. Think about curiosity kills the cat, mm-hmm. Right? And it really kind of made me think, because you actually have a quote by George Carlin in your book that I thought was really powerful. And for those who are kind of raising kids right now, I think this was really a thoughtful quote. Don't just teach your children to read. Teach them to question what they read, right? So it goes a bit further into, I think one of the reasons why the curiosity kind of dies after a while is that we're told, stop asking so many questions. Curiosity kills a cat. And we create this culture where kids aren't asked to kind of think independently. And so I thought that was a really kind of interesting quote that you had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to add, because you're talking about culture, right? And what we create, and that's at home, but at work, I know a lot of people are thinking of the culture they're creating within their own work environment. And I think that was what was most interesting part in a way to me, was looking at some of the companies where they got away from just doing status quo ways of creating things. And in the book, I know I talked about New Ormond Hospital, where they were having a lot of patients that were not doing well they were going from surgery to recovery, and they were dying, and they tried everything to be better, and they couldn't figure it out until executives saw a race car team, a Formula One race car team on TV one night, and they watched them take apart a Ferrari, put it back together in like 7 seconds or something crazy, right? And they thought, well, how can they do that? And we can't just move someone from here to here without a problem. So they hired them to come back to look at what they did. And they gave them several suggestions of how to communicate better. Basically, the doctor had to dictate his notes while somebody was listening, instead of dictating and then going and doing it separately, and something get lost in the transfer. And there was just simple things. And sometimes getting an outside perspective like that can make a huge difference, because they had great return on that investment, because people were obviously doing so much better now. But, it could just take simple questions. Disney had a whole bunch of turnover in their laundry division. And as glamorous as it sounds to work at Disney, it's never glamorous to work in the laundry division, apparently. And they were dropping out, right? So they thought, well, let's just go to people and ask them, what can we do to make your job better? And they really expected everybody to go, well, buy me a Ferrari or something, you know what I mean? Something that they couldn't do anything about. But they got really reasonable kinds of things back from people. Things like put an air vent over my station so that I'm not so hot. Make my table go up and down so my back doesn't hurt. Just things, right? And all I did was be curious and go to them and ask, how can we make this better? And that seems so simple. I think the problem is a lot of people don't ask because they're afraid of what they're going to hear. They're afraid that they have to do something about it. They're so stuck in that status quo. Status quo is such a fascinating thing, because I don't know if you've seen the research study that they did, but they had a woman go into a doctor's office thinking she was getting her eyes examined. But it was really a research experiment to see how people will just go along with the same way of doing things. And what they did was they surrounded her with a bunch of people who were actors, and she didn't know that. And every few minutes they would ring a bell, and everybody around her would just stand up and sit down without explanation whatsoever. And she looked around at them and like, what's going on? But only after 3 times, she got up and sat down every time they rang the bell as well. She doesn't know why. It's called social learning, right? And so you don't want to be uncomfortable. You want to do what everybody else is doing. So what they did was they took all the people back one at a time as if they were patients and left her alone to see what she would do, rang the bell. She still got up and sat down. So they thought, well, this is really interesting. Let's put real patients in and see what happens. The bell rings. She stands up and sits down. The guy next to her looks at her, says, why did you do that? She said, everybody else was doing, I thought I was supposed to. So what do you think he does when the bell rings, right? So everybody just gets up and sits down, and we do that at work. And that's why I love the idea of the Disneys and the Norman hospitals. But there's other companies. I've done videos with Verizon where they've created little vignettes for their onboarding procedures. So they hire curious people, and I'll talk about curiosity, and then they'll have one of their employees get on and explain how curiosity has made them successful in the company. And then they play that throughout all their stores or in their onboarding and different things. And like I said, Novartis, they not only did they study it, but they have a Curiosity Month where I would come in and speak, and so would 88 other people or something crazy. I mean, it was a huge deal that they make, and they would reward people for doing 100 hours of learning every year. And they made curiosity a core cultural goal. SurveyMonkey, I had Zane Lurie on my show, who's the CEO of SurveyMonkey. They value curiosity so much. Obviously, they trade in curiosity, everything's a survey. They changed their address to One Curiosity Way. So, I mean, there's just example after example. And some of it is getting out of status quo, like we're talking about. Ben and Jerry's, for example, if you've never had that, it's ice cream and it's good, but not every flavor is appealing forever. And they don't just keep saying, well, you're better like this, berry flavored, whatever it is they've come up with this year. If people stop liking it to the extent that they did, they actually give it a funeral. They put on their website a headstone that says, this was popular from this year to this year, and we're giving it a rest, And I mean, there's so many things we need to give a rest. And that's why we see so many blockbuster Kodaks go under, because it worked great in the past. Let's just keep doing that. I mean, we got to have 800 judge shows, or we have to have, Big was such a good movie. Let's make 100 shows where we switch bodies. I mean, we do that. We do the same thing over and over again. And sometimes you got to just question. Van Moof is a hybrid bicycle company who was having a lot of their bikes break. And they were like questioning this. Why, when we ship bikes, are they breaking? What can we do to fix this without spending a lot of money? Because we don't have money, right? And they could have doubled the packaging, but then that would have doubled their costs. So they looked out there, they used their curiosity, and they saw what else ships in a similar package? And they saw that flat screen TVs shipped in almost exactly the same package, but they weren't breaking. And they're like, well, how does that work? That theirs doesn't break and ours does. And the only difference was there's a picture of a flat screen television on the box, right? So they thought, let's spend a couple cents, put some ink on the box, print a flat screen, see what happens. What do you think happened? A lot less breakage. So, there's creative things you could come up with that maybe don't break the bank. I mean, there's just, I could go on and on, but I think that those are really interesting to look at, the companies who have created this culture, as you were talking about, culture at home, culture at work. It comes from the top.
So how, I mean, you kind of mentioned it like earlier, but like creating like a culture of curiosity, like, and not just in the workforce, but at home or whatnot. What are some like simple steps or things, 5, 10 things that this audience, or, because some of them are owners or business, like entrepreneurs or CEOs of their companies, or those kind of listening on, how can we create like a culture of curiosity, either in our homes or even at work?
Well, as with any culture, you have to model it, first of all, and you have to decide, this is our core values. You have it written down, you discuss it with everybody, and you do what you say you're going to do. You don't just ask them to do it. So what I do when I train companies is, not only do we go over their personal results of their curiosity, of what's holding them back, and then we have them create kind of a personal SWOT analysis, which that's kind of stuff you can do. You might try yourself at home. You could find out what's holding you back. Is it what kinds of fear, what kinds of assumptions, what kind of technology issues, what kind of environmental issues, and then create, what are your strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats personally to meet getting over these issues, right? And as you're doing that, you can create SMART goals that are measurable of how you're going to reach that. So let's say you want to be a better critical thinker. You might want to present at the next meeting and start with a small topic that you already like, but you don't know enough about. And then you develop your critical thinking through researching different things and comparing, and you start small, and you make a goal for that kind of thing. I'm going to deliver it on Friday. I'm going to research it Thursday. And you backtrack to where you are now. And we do those kinds of things in the training sessions, but we also do overall goals with the organization. So like if leadership is having problems with engagement or innovation or whatever their problems are, we go, just like they did Disney, you go to the employees in these training sessions and you say, how can we improve these things? Everybody whiteboards all these great brainstorming ideas, create, a compilation of what everybody comes up with, bring that back to leadership, and then that gives you things to work on within the company. So that's another kind of thing you can do. But go through the 4 factors and fear, and just ask yourself, why don't you ask questions in meetings? Just start with something simple like that. For assumptions, ask yourself, what do you tell yourself you're not interested in? Where does that come from? Technology, how do you over or underutilize it? And environment, who's told you what you cared about didn't matter? And now that you look at those things and you've got it like quantifiable in front of you, what can you do to overcome those? How can you create these SMART, measurable goals? Just like if you did an engagement survey, you're going to put it on your calendar. This is when we're going to talk about this. We're going to see where we stand with that. And, you can have different levels within each part of these factors. You might fear failure, but you may not fear somebody giving you more work because you've asked a question. It just depends what kinds of things that you fear. So kind of get deep into those fears, into this, what you're telling yourself. Oh, my sister said that was a stupid thing to do, or my teacher told me that wasn't what everybody else liked, or whatever it is. Go way back if you need to figure out what the roots are of it, because sometimes it's something that you don't even recognize what your assumptions are telling you in your head, that, we see a lot with men are more likely to just take an opportunity for a job and say, hey, yeah, I'll apply for that. Where women are more likely to go, well, I got to have 100% of the qualifications before I apply for that. So there's some of it that's male-female differences, but in general, in my results, it was really close.
There seems to be kind of like a through line too, because as I listen to you and I'm looking at all the comments when we ask, what's the number one thing that's kind of like holding you back from being kind of curious? We have probably between YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn on the live stream, we probably have over 100 people watching right now. And I saw a lot of fear. I saw a lot of fear of failure as well.
Right.
And I'm wondering if cultures that create a psychologically safe place for people to make mistakes,
Right.
Create more curious people, because you're not going to be penalized or judged. And I can't find the exact quotes because there's so many of them. But there was a quote from Sarah Blakely from Spanx.
Thanks. Yeah.
And it was kind of about taking risks. But I remember reading her or watching an interview with on her, and she was saying how her parents would basically encourage their kids to fail. So literally they would sit as, her family and, her brothers and her father would have each of the children say one thing they failed miserably at. And it created this environment where she wasn't afraid to fail, because failing wasn't a bad thing.
Right.
Failing was an end to, like a means to an end, where, you're supposed to kind of learn from those mistakes, right? And that same stat that you had used, in terms of job interviews, or women won't apply for jobs unless they have 100% of the qualifications, where men will have 60%. But then men are also taught to be more risk-taking when you think about how kids are raised, right? Think about how boys are at a playground and how girls are, right? I'm around kids like, all the time, and it's like, boys are just like, oh yeah, jump off, like, the top of the building. Girls are like, be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful, right? And so I think there's like a through line of this connection between curiosity and risk and failure. I don't know what exactly it is, but
well, you're hitting a lot of the environmental influences. What your parents teach little girls, versus what they teach little boys sometimes is some factor in that. And there's so much that you have to focus on, from what you can have a positive environment to help with technology, like Wozniak. I've met him a couple times, and his book I Was is a great book. He talks about his dad sitting with him, bringing home all these gadgets that he worked at. I think he was literally a rocket scientist. I got to look it up, but I'm pretty sure he had a pretty heavy duty job. And he brought back all these gadgets, and he would give them to young Wozniak and say, here, you need this because it brings electricity, and you need the electricity to run this. And he was very specific and got him very much interested in why it worked this way and how to do things, instead of just tossing all the gadgets at him and saying, go play in the corner. So there's that hands-on approach that we need to do sometimes with people, just to get them that sense of confidence that they may have had taught out of them. They may have experienced a culture that, when I got into the working world, it was a mad men culture. Women did not do certain things that men were able to do, and it just changed. And so we may be at a different level in some respects. I think millennials, of course, have a different experience than my generation of boomers. So, it just depends on your generation, of what you've experienced. We all come with this baggage of different things that we have to recognize. But as a leader, you can work with people one-on-one. One of the person who wrote the foreword for my book was Keith Krach, who was the billionaire behind DocuSign and all the success he's had with Reba and all that. And I picked him because he's a super curious guy. And what I liked about his culture was he would not pretend he knew everything. He would just say, hey, I hire people who are really smart and have them around me. And you can fail forward, as you were referring to earlier, that we can have the Google mentality. You can have a certain percentage of your time to explore, or, I'm seeing a lot more of that than we saw in the past. But we need to see even more of it, because there's a lot of places where people just don't feel safe. I've had Amy Edmondson on the show talking about that. And one TED Talk she gave is great, because she talked about how important curiosity is to collaboration. And if you haven't watched her TED Talk, I recommend it. She talks about how the Chilean miners got stuck under the rock and how they got them out. And if they weren't curious, they wouldn't have been able to collaborate and get those people. They would be dead. And we have these life and death decisions, but we also have day in and day out decisions that take equal amount of curiosity to keep up and be at the top of your game.
I love that. So we have a question from Amanda, if you want to kind of unmute yourself, who's kind of live in the Zoom audience. Amanda, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Lan, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
can hear you.
Hi, thank you so much, Lan, and welcome,
you.
Diane, Dr. Diane. It's nice to hear you.
Thank you.
I actually have less of a question and more of just something that really struck me. I wanted to speak back to Lan, your prompt when you said, what is it in an environment that can facilitate curiosity? I think you had asked that. And I just wanted to kind of share a personal experience, which is I come from Viacom and my hero is Judy McGrath. And Judy is one of the best creative leaders I've ever come across and in my career. And Judy's mantra is a safe place to suck. That's what she says, a safe place to suck. And so it does, like Dr. Diane, when you said, it's top down, what was so great about working under Judy and Tom was just that you knew they facilitated, innovation, and that you weren't going to be penalized for coming up with really great ideas. And we used to play a thing called corny or cool. And sometimes it's like if the idea was corny and cool, we knew we were onto something. So, but yeah, it really came from the top down from, they're both founding fathers of the original. They're like a few of the last stragglers at MTV. And so I just wanted to say that my experience was just that from our creative leadership, we really were taught that it was a safe place to suck. And I've heard people, I haven't read the Steve Jobs book, but I've heard people say there was a
Are you getting
under this? Okay, yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks so much, Amanda.
Yeah, that's a really great thing, and to get these examples are really critical for people to see. Oh, okay, so that culture embraces that, and I used a lot of that. I actually had a 5th book come out last year that was about perception, and our perception is built on IQ, of course, EQ for emotional quotient, CQ for cultural quotient, and CQ for curiosity quotient. And if you don't recognize how your perception impacts everything in the workplace, it's something you really need to study more about, because there's so many areas of the world that we're doing business with now. And just because we're curious or we're certain thing in one area, it may not blend well with the other culture that we're mixing into. So you have to kind of look at everything as a process when it comes to perception. And to do that, you have to ask questions. I wrote my dissertation on emotional intelligence, as I mentioned, because I think it was really important to have empathy. And to me, empathy is such a big part of emotional intelligence. But to get that empathy, to really have myself in your shoes, I have to ask questions. I have to be curious to find out what your shoes are like, right? And that, because my perception is my reality. It's I don't know what it really is to be in your setting. So curiosity is at the core of everything.
So Diane, in your book, you kind of talk about the beginner's mind, right? And how it's a key to effective leadership. Can you talk more about that and what the research is telling us? Because the beginner's mind is such a powerful, I think, kind of level setting tool, because I'm going to be very frank with you. When I was younger, I was very curious. Then as I got older, I realized that I didn't do things that I wasn't good at. Right.
I can't win. I don't want to play kind of thing.
Exactly. So if I knew I was, for example, I've had this deathly, and it just sounds really stupid right now, but I had a deathly fear of karaoke. But because I was just afraid of singing. And karaoke is supposed to be fun. But one of my friends, Jeff Harry, had this, interview, and he was saying the opposite of fun is fear and judgment, and so it really kind of like sparked something in my head. I was like, I'm not afraid of doing this. I'm afraid of the shame and being bad at something. And so when you have the beginner's mindset, you realize that every master, every expert, Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan was once a beginner. They once sucked. That's why I kind of loved Amanda's quote, you know, a safe place to suck. We should make that into a t-shirt, right? That's Community of Seven's new mantra, a safe place to suck. But like, what's the power of the beginner's mind and why is it important for effective leadership?
Well, it all goes back to that voice in your head that we're telling ourselves. All that these things are bad or good, or all. We don't know what we don't know a lot of times, and so we create what we think we know. And sometimes you have to go back and just wipe the slate clean and start asking questions and start exploring. What would this be like? I took Naveen Jain to dinner one night. He's the big guy. He's billionaire behind Viome and Moon Express and all this. And I asked him how he determines what he's going into, because I mean, he's got one company that's all about your microbiome in your belly, and the next one's mining ore on the moon. And I'm like, how do you go from one to the other? How do you have that ability? And he just starts from scratch. He doesn't know anything about whatever field he goes into, and he learns what it is. Sometimes having fresh eyes, it's like a golf swing. If you don't have to relearn your golf swing, you're a lot better off than if you've already developed this horrible swing and you got to start trying to fix it, right? But we all have some form of a golf swing we need to fix. So it's hard to completely have zero experience at stuff. So you have to recognize that our experiences have shaped us, and that can be problematic. I want to make sure you're still there, Lan. You're frozen on my screen. I want to make sure you can hear me.
Oh yeah, I can totally see.
Oh, you're back. Yeah.
Okay. You know what? We're going through a heat. What do you call it? Heat wave.
Yeah.
So all Con Ed is, you know, like everything is. I don't know. It's not a brownout, but the electricity sometimes dips. Yeah. Not as hot as Arizona, but no. Does anyone else, either on live stream or in the Zoom room, live in the Zoom room, want to ask a question? Let me check right now. Olu, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Lan. Thank you, Dr. Dian.
Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to corroborate, what you and Lan have been talking about regarding, perspective or perception about, learning how to suck. And that comes from, the mix of us thinking that when we suck or when we fail, we're actually a failure. That is, you see yourself as a failure. But as an entrepreneur, I just want to just throw it out and to say that we must be daring to suck, because without that, we can't innovate. Without you being comfortable in sucking, in failing, not that you're a failure, you just failed. And that is actually an indication that you're trying to do something that needs you to stretch yourself and grow. Just like, Thomas Edison, you can imagine him going over that invention of trying to get, to the light bulb and just doing it and failing. And he said he didn't fail. He just knew 999 ways, so
not to make a light bulb, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And without that tenacity, or, without that confidence in his curiosity to just know how to do it, we wouldn't be having this kind of conversation, what light is right now. And also to touch on having that safety net. I think it behoves on leaders to create that, safety net where either your subordinates or your teammates can be comfortable in sucking and not being, labeled as a failure. So that, gives more people, it gives them more, opportunities to attempt something, because you find people say, oh, I can't do it because something happened one time, and they just categorize themselves as a failure. Whereas they're not a failure, they're just, in transit, they're on a journey to, to doing something great. They just need to grow and stretch. You get what I mean?
I
So
do.
yeah,
I
and
have
then
a question for you. I want to ask you, where do you think competition we learn in sales and different aspects, where do you think that falls, that if you have to win or you lose? Was that good or bad? I mean, when I was a kid, everything was a competition. And do you think that that has an impact on your ability to feel that sense of risk is too much? And this is for everybody, not just for you.
I think we're all bought into competition because, even from the get-go in a family,
Mhm.
you begin to see traces of competition, either with your siblings, either your mom favors one sibling or the other, and you're trying to, mom says, oh, she's a tech person, or he's this. So
Yeah, we get labeled.
we
Mhm.
get labeled, and then you striving to, compete. So we're born into competition, whether we like it or not. If it's not in the home, it's going to be in school or in the environment that tells you just have to, you just have to brace up. So unless you are comfortable in your skin to understand, just like Lance said, I've been a curious, and I'm still a very curious person till forever, till I die, because that's what sustains innovation. If you're not ready to be curious, to suck, to fail, even without the safety net. Okay, because some people say, oh, I've got to have a safety net, where I can suck. Even without the safety net, be ready to suck even on your own and pull yourself up, because it's not about how many times you fall, it's about how many times you rise up. But I want to just drop it with everyone in the house that we need to, just like Lance said, take in some things, from this meeting, and that is, are you part of the culture of providing a safety net for people around you to suck? Because if you're not, you're part of those that are making people not to be curious. Because if you're judgmental and you label someone, you're part of that ecosystem of not providing a safety net. So
Yeah.
for me, I just wanted
Thank
to,
you.
Well,
to
thank
share
you.
that.
I love
Thank
that.
you.
Thank
That's
you
really
so much.
wonderful. I want to tie into what she just said, because back to Dr. Francesca Gino's work, she studied leaders and looked at what they thought, how they were encouraging curiosity in the workplace. And they thought they were. And yet, when you ask the people who worked for them, they weren't in agreement that they were encouraging it. So I recommend read Francesca Gino's HBR article. It's a case for curiosity or something. There's cats all over, and read what she wrote on that, because that is something that went about the time I published the book. She was writing that, and so it's not in my book. But I think that it's really important to recognize we're back to perception again. What we see, what we think. I mean, I understand with land, just because my family, we were super competitive. And so if you couldn't win, you didn't want to play. And I have a voice that will peel paint from the wall. So I didn't want to go to karaoke either, because if you're not the best, I understand that way of thinking. But when we're at work, we have to recognize people's perceptions. And sometimes it takes doing surveys that are anonymous and getting things where people don't feel so put on the spot, and being humble and just calling out that, hey, I may look stupid for asking this, but I want you guys to ask stupid questions. So I'm going to just show you, I'm going to ask everything and be what I want from you. And that's going to be critical.
I think that modeling is so important, that as a leader, you don't have to have all of the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also creating a culture where, because I've led teams for, over 20 years now. And one of the things I used to always say to my team was, there's no such thing as failing or making a mistake on our team. It's about, course corrections. So, you might make what you think is a mistake, but what it really is you learn to kind of course correct. And we're doing multiple micro improvements each day, keep on moving forward, keep on progressing. And when you have that culture where there's no such thing as failure, it allows people to speak up. It allows people to make mistakes. And I think as a leader, it's so important for you to set the tone in the culture. So I have actually, I want to kind of spotlight some of the things that people have been kind of talking about. So Tamika, on the message board, I really like your comment, Tamika. I was given the freedom to explore and try new things in my company, and that allowed me to offer more value. So I think that's really powerful, right? When you have this culture from your company to kind of try and learn, it just makes things so much powerful. Thank you so much, Tamika, for sharing that. And I think Renee, you have some great. Renee, you've kind of dropped some knowledge on our comments. Renee, do you want to kind of unmute and like either ask a question or kind of like an observation from this talk with Dr. Diane Hamilton?
Thank you. I will definitely unmute, but I will not turn my camera on. It wouldn't be good for anybody involved. but yes, I'm very. How are you? Thank you so much for the discussion and even the knowledge drops. So I hopefully we'll have that in the chat. The actual books and TED Talks. Those are so helpful. I just I've just learned, and I'm still learning. You know, that whole meditative part, that self-examination part about, you know, what shapes you and what you're and how you shape your world. And I made a reference in one of these in the chat box about, you know, even watching television. I come from an advertising background originally, and being able to talk back to even those television commercials or the movies that we see, and we just kind of, ingest it. And I just made reference to this recent ad about Key Bank and them saying sometimes we get into our own heads about money. And that ad is very popular and it's very true. And it shows like 5 different versions of yourself, from a young child to, an older person looking like you're retiring, and how those voices in your head shape your decisions. But then as a person with a cultural background of color, that sometimes those messages are systematic. The financial institutions haven't always been great and advocated for us having access to capital. And so, I think having that time in your day where you kind of relax and unwind and think about kind of the slings and arrows that come your way, and making sure to kind of like dust that off and clean that off for the next day, and challenge it. There's a lot to be said for challenging the things that come into your ear gate and your eye gate.
Awesome. So I love that, Renee. Thank you so much. So sometimes you kind of, if you're not going to get that support from your company or your community, that sometimes you kind of have to nurture it within yourself, or, kind of, you're not going to always have a supportive environment that fosters curiosity. And sometimes that's something that you need to kind of trust and believe in. Awesome. So David, well, actually it's 3:58. Just thank you for your comment as well. I'm going to read that right now, David's comment. David Hansen, I believe in questioning everything, but some people in authority feel threatened by it. Do you have any suggestions on how to handle that?
I have had a lot of people ask, if the leader doesn't buy into the need for this, what happens there? And sometimes it's time to cut bait. It really is. If you may be in a company that maybe is never going to get it. A leader is not ever going to be anything other than they are. So you have to weigh your alternatives. Sometimes it takes a small movement at the bottom of, a lot of people getting together saying, we want this, for people to take it more seriously than just one person coming to leadership and saying that this needs to be done. I worked in a company where they all sat on the top floor. You couldn't get up there to even ask a question without a key code and things. And they never came and talked to anybody. And it wasn't a culture I wanted to work in. And it was never going to change. And it hasn't changed in all those years. So sometimes that's the case. Sometimes just coming to your boss and talking to them about, this is what I'm developing in myself. I want to develop curiosity. So I don't want you to take it as I'm attacking you or asking questions or undermining you. I am working on making this company better. I want it to be more innovative, and I think it'll help everybody. So that's my intention behind my questions. And if people know your intention, that makes a big difference when you ask the question.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diane. If everyone can kind of put your videos on, if you can, because we need a round of applause for Diane. Thank you so much for being an amazing guest. Woo-hoo.
Well, thank you for inviting me. You guys are a great group.
Any final thoughts before we depart?
From me?
Or like suggestions to the group.
I want you just to think about those 4 factors more than anything. I want you to just really consider what you're missing out on in life because you're holding yourself back and you don't even recognize you're doing it. We don't even think about those 4 factors. And if you could contemplate that, anybody who hasn't risked failure doesn't gain anything. And so think about that.
Love that. Thank you so much, Diane.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. See you at the next call.
Bye, everyone.
See